everyone, and good evening. Welcome to the Linglobe channel. This time, we'll be bringing you content about preserving the world's languages for the future. Please enjoy it to the end.
Welcome to Linglove Voice. You know, usually when we look at how societies organize themselves, we expect precision.
Right, like strict borders on a map.
Yeah, exactly. It's like looking at an X-ray of a broken arm, you see the jagged white line, and you know exactly where the bone ends and the fracture begins.
It's binary.
It is, and honestly, that's comforting. We like to think that ancient cultures operate the exact same way, right? Like they're rigid, defined by strict bloodlines.
Mm-hmm. And desperate to isolate themselves from the modern world.
Totally. But today, you are exploring a landscape with us where that X-ray machine just completely shatters. For you listening right now, consider yourself a fellow learner joining the conversation.
We're looking at a masterclass in how an ancient culture uses modern democratic tools to actually thrive in a globalized world.
Right. And I should mention, all of our insights today are drawn directly from the Linglove materials provided to us. So let's start with our first slide. Beyond the Borders, the evolution of the Basque Autonomous Community.
This is such an extraordinary story of cultural survival.
It really is. It's not just a history lesson. It's an active blueprint of modern democracy.
But to understand this blueprint, we really have to let go of our modern obsession with rigid borders.
Like separating the people from the politics?
Exactly. The political machinery of a state and the cultural heartbeat of a people are rarely the exact same shape.
Which brings us right into that friction on our next slide. Two concepts, one identity.
Right, the Venn diagram.
Yeah. In the Linglove materials, they show these two distinct ideas layered on top of each other. First, you have Euskal,
which is the cultural, ethnic, and linguistic homeland.
Mm-hmm. And it's expansive, right? It stretches across parts of northern Spain and bleeds right into southwestern France. It basically operates completely independently of modern political lines.
Yeah, and in contrast to that massive footprint, you have Euskadi.
The modern political entity.
Right. It's a highly specific, self-governing, autonomous community located entirely within the Spanish state.
Formed by the 1979 Statute of Autonomy, right?
Exactly. So the cultural homeland is this ancient, fluid thing, while the political entity is very modern and strictly defined.
So where do these two circles actually overlap?
They intersect in their shared history, their language, and their deeply rooted traditions of self-governance.
So the modern Basque Autonomous Community, the BAC, is essentially a political container built to protect that cultural identity.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, let's look at the actual shape of that container on our next slide. The geography of Euskadi. If we look at the physical map of the formal BAC today, it's actually surprisingly concentrated.
Very much so.
It's composed of just 3 historical territories in Spain: Álava, Vizcaya, and Gipuzkoa. That's the absolute limit of the formal BAC jurisdiction.
The jurisdiction stops there, sure, but the cultural identity definitely does not.
Right, because of Euskal.
Yeah, that broader cultural region historically includes Navar, which operates as its own separate entity in Spain, and also Iparralde, which is the northern Basque country in France.
So the formal political map is almost like this concentrated nucleus, while the cultural footprint radiates way further out across totally different modern jurisdictions.
Which creates a really unique administrative reality. The people outside the BAC might share the ancient heritage, but they live under entirely different legal systems.
But wait, that seems to create a glaring contradiction. And this leads us to our next slide, the Navar clause.
Okay, lay it on me.
Well, I have to push back here. If Navar shares these incredibly deep ancient roots with the Basque cultural region, why is it a completely separate autonomous community within Spain? Like, are they permanently walled off from each other?
Actually, no. The Spanish Constitution accounts for this historical overlap. Tied to that Statute of Autonomy, there's an explicit legal pathway for Navar to join the BAC.
Oh, wow. So they can just merge.
Yeah, it's basically a constitutional mechanism just waiting to be activated.
But if the constitutional key is sitting right there in the lock, why hasn't anyone turned it? I mean, is there just too much political friction?
There's immense complexity in merging two distinct, established administrative bodies. It requires specific, localized legal procedures to be initiated and approved by the citizens of Navar.
So it's not a quick process.
Not at all. As Linglove materials describe it, the door remains open but uncrossed. The legal option is there, but pragmatically, they currently function effectively as neighbors rather than roommates.
Okay, that makes sense. But if the cultural borders are fluid and the political borders are strict, how does the government actually decide who gets to be a part of this community?
That is the big question.
And the answer is laid out on our next slide, the blueprint of belonging. I gotta say, this is fundamentally different from how I thought ancient cultures operated.
You expected strict rules about bloodlines, didn't you?
Totally. I expected you'd have to prove your ancestral heritage or something. But instead, belonging here is almost like a civic subscription. The fundamental rule is just based on residency.
Right. If you legally reside in a BAC municipality, you hold full Basque political rights.
Which is a huge departure from, ethnocentric definitions of identity.
It really is. The flowchart in the Linglove materials shows how robust this legal tether is, even if you leave the region.
Yeah, if someone moves abroad, they just ask two legal questions, right?
First, was your last legal Spanish residence in Euskadi? And second, do you still retain your Spanish nationality?
And if you say yes to both, you keep your political rights. And the materials note that this even extends to their descendants.
Yep. You don't need a DNA test. You just need to maintain your legal civic connection.
So by tying ancient identity to modern residency, they've engineered a society that can absorb new people without requiring them to share, specific genetic ancestry.
Which is brilliant.
It is. And that civic definition has triggered a massive demographic shift, which we explore on our next slide, growth through arrival.
Because belonging is residency-based, Euskadi's modern population growth isn't coming from natural birth rates.
Right. The contemporary growth is entirely sustained by positive migration flows.
The demographic data points to a really striking reality. A huge percentage of Euskadi's current residents were born abroad.
So it's this epicenter of an ancient identity, but it's also a highly diverse cosmopolitan society, heavily populated by modern immigrants.
It completely shatters the idea that a culture has to isolate itself to survive.
Yeah, they aren't locking the gates. They are literally relying on foreign arrivals to sustain their population.
The survival strategy is integration, not isolation.
But realistically, that creates a mechanical problem. If you have a massive influx of global migration, how do you prevent the ancient culture from just being completely diluted?
Well, the tool they use for that is language.
Which brings us to our next slide, Euskera, the voice of Euskadi. Euskera is the ancestral language of the Basque people, right?
And under the modern political framework, the Statute of Autonomy legally recognizes Euskera as an official language of Euskadi, on equal footing with Spanish.
So language is the primary mechanism of integration. The BAC basically functions as an institutional fortress to protect and revitalize it.
It's the cultural glue. Rather than forcing new arrivals to adopt an ancient ethnic identity, which is impossible anyway, the region invites them to participate in the living language.
The language is the bridge between the ancient history and the diverse modern population, but they don't just cross their fingers and hope people learn it.
Oh, definitely not.
And that leads us to our next slide. Institutionalizing bilingualism. The BAC institutions are legally mandated to guarantee the active use of both languages.
They rely on three main pillars: education, public administration, and social life. And this isn't just a passive recommendation.
Right. It's aggressive active engineering. Let's look at the mechanics. In education, the government actively structures and funds the schools so that Euskera is deeply embedded in the curriculum,
Ensuring the next generation is totally immersed in it.
Yeah, and in public administration, they require civil servants to be proficient in the language. If a citizen wants to interact with the government, they have the legal right to do it seamlessly in Euskera.
So if you want a public sector job, or if your kids are in school, the language is an unavoidable institutionalized part of your daily life.
They are purposefully weaving it into the modern infrastructure.
Exactly. The government is utilizing modern bureaucratic tools, funding, hiring requirements, educational mandates, to aggressively protect an ancient linguistic asset.
But pulling that off requires a massively powerful regional government. So let's examine how that power is structured on our next slide. The foundations of self-government.
The BAC is not just a standard regional branch taking orders from a central capital.
Right. It operates as a union of three distinct historical territories. First is Alava, which has the smallest population but maintains incredibly strong historical institutions.
The second is Vizcaya. This is the economic engine of the region, highest population density, major industrial centers.
And finally, Gipuzkoa, which is characterized by deeply rooted historical traditions of localized self-governance.
The fascinating part is how they form the modern government. The Statute of Autonomy explicitly guarantees the right of these three territories to preserve their ancestral institutions.
So they didn't just erase their historical borders to build a new parliament. They federated those ancient foundations into a modern union.
They recognized that to build a stable modern government, they had to respect the distinct historical authority of the territories that were agreeing to join it.
But that respect creates what looks like a major mathematical flaw in their democracy, which brings us to our next slide. Territorial equality over population density.
I know where you're going with this.
I mean, I am genuinely struggling with the mechanics here. Vizcaya is this massive economic hub with a huge population. Álava has a fraction of those people. Yet the Basque parliament have an equal number of representatives from each of the three territories.
Yes.
If I'm a voter in Vizcaya, my vote mathematically counts for significantly less. Isn't that fundamentally unequal?
In a strict majoritarian sense, yes, it is unequal. This system deliberately rejects the concept of one person, one vote at the regional parliamentary level.
Wow, okay.
Instead, it prioritizes a historical balancing scale. The mechanic guarantees absolute parity among the three ancient territories, regardless of population fluctuations.
But doesn't that frustrate the people in Vizcaya? They provide the vast majority of the economic fuel and the population, but they're capped at the same political power as the smallest territory.
It certainly creates tension. But you have to view the BAC not as a modern corporate merger, but as a treaty among ancient equals.
Oh, I see.
Without that absolute guarantee of territorial equality, a smaller territory like Álava might never have agreed to federate into the modern BAC in the first place.
Right. The parity prevents the high-density economic centers from just swallowing the historical autonomy of the rural regions. It's a federal compromise.
It prioritizes the survival of the union over the sheer math of the census.
And that local autonomy isn't just theoretical, as we see on our next slide. Foral provincial councils and assemblies. We need to look at how power actually operates on the ground in these three territories.
Because each one commands exceptional localized authority.
Yeah, through two main institutions. There is the General Assembly, which is the legislative body, and the Foral Provincial Council, which acts as the executive body.
And to understand the gravity of these institutions, we have to look at their specific powers. These are not glorified city councils handling local zoning.
Right.
These provincial councils control taxation, massive infrastructure projects like highways, regional agriculture, and comprehensive social welfare program.
They are legitimately running the heavy machinery of government within their own borders. They manage massive budgets independently of the regional parliament.
The decentralization is profound. The overarching BAC handles regional coordination, but a citizen's day-to-day administrative reality is heavily dictated by these powerful provincial institutions.
Which begs the question, how do they afford to run all these massive programs? And the answer is on our next slide, the fiscal shield, the traditional economic agreement.
This is the ultimate mechanism that makes the entire system possible.
Yeah, the Linglove materials explain that the BAC possesses a level of fiscal independence that is almost unheard of for a regional government in Europe. It's based on deep historical treaties with the Spanish state.
Let's trace how the money actually flows, because it's the inverse of standard regional administration. Normally, a central state collects all the taxes and then delegates an allowance down to the region.
But not here.
No. In the BAC, the Basque institutions have the legal authority to maintain, regulate, and collect their own taxes directly from their citizens.
So they hold the purse strings entirely, they collect the revenue locally, and then they negotiate a quota to pay up to the Spanish state to cover federal services like defense or foreign affairs.
That is the mechanism. They generate and control their own wealth.
And without this traditional economic agreement, the BAC wouldn't have the financial capacity to subsidize the education system for Euskera or fund their extensive social welfare programs.
Exactly. The fiscal shield is what allows the cultural and political autonomy to exist in reality rather than just on paper.
It all synthesizes perfectly on our next slide, the modern vessel for ancient heritage. This slide basically outlines the complete architecture of everything we've been discussing.
Right. At the base, you have the historical root, This includes the deep ethnic identity, the ancient language, and the traditional laws of the three distinct territories,
And those historical roots are then integrated into the modern political framework.
which utilizes the mechanics we just explored: the residency-based political rights, the aggressive language protection policies, the equal parliamentary representation, and of course the financial power of the traditional economic agreement.
And when you run those ancient roots through that modern framework, you get the final societal outcome. A highly diverse, growing population driven by global migration, a reviving ancient language, and a stable balance of localized power.
It is a profound structural achievement. They've engineered a modern vessel highly capable of carrying a fragile ancient heritage safely through all the pressures of a globalized century.
Which brings us to the core takeaway on our final slide for today: a living continuity.
The defining insight from the Linglobe materials is that ancient history is not required to be static. Euskadi demonstrates that an ancient culture can survive the modern world not by hiding from it, but by building a highly adaptable democratic framework.
They translated traditional self-governance into a system of inclusive residency, territorial parity, and institutionalized linguistic protection.
It's a brilliant blueprint for modern resilience.
They took the absolute best parts of their heritage, the language, the treaties, the fierce independence, and coded them into an operating system that actually relies on diversity and migration to function.
Beautifully said.
So, as we close today's journey, here's a final thought for you to mull over on your own. We live in an era where many distinct cultures feel deeply threatened by globalization, and their instinct is often to build walls, close their borders, and strictly police their identity.
Right.
But if an ancient culture like the Basque people can successfully secure their future by actively embracing migration and integrating those arrivals through language and civic participation, what vital lessons could other endangered cultures around the globe learn from Euskadi's blueprint?
Thank you for watching until the end. We will continue to bring you many more languages from around the world. Please subscribe to our channel. See you next time on the Linglobe channel.